This video is about long division of polynomials. Okay, you need to remember how long division works. You learned this back in elementary school. Let's just review a problem real quick. The 2 will go into the 6. You ask yourself, how many times will 2 go into 6? Well, it goes in 3 times. 3 times 2 is 6. Subtract 0, bring down the 5. How many times will 2 go into 5? Well, it goes 2 times. 2 times 2 is 4. Subtract that from 5, you get 1. Bring down the 4. How many times does 2 go into 14? 7 times. 14. Subtract 0. Bring down the 3. How many times does 2 go into 3? Once. Subtract. And into 12, 6 times. And I have 0 remainder. So that's the basics. You multiply, subtract, bring down the next term. Multiply, subtract, bring down the next term. You're going to follow the same process with polynomials. So here's how the problems will look. It'll give you a long equation here and a shorter one over here. So you just remember which one goes in which. This is the outside of the division bar, and this is the inside of the division bar. When in doubt, the longer one goes on the inside. All right, so I still look at the same thing, except I have to look at powers of x now. So I have x to the first power out here. Here, x is to the third. This is a 1, and this is a 6. So I have to think about two different things. What times 1 gives me a 6? Well, a 6 does. And then, what times x to the first will give me x cubed? That would be 2 more x's, so x squared. So now I have to multiply this whole thing times this whole divisor. Okay, so 6x squared times 1x gives me 6x cubed. 6x squared times negative 2 gives me negative 12x squared. All right, so we've multiplied. Now we have to subtract, which means we subtract the whole thing, meaning we're going to have to change our signs. This becomes a negative 6x cubed plus 12x squared. If you did it right, that first term should go to 0, which this one does. Now I have 19x squared plus 12x squared gives me negative 7x squared. Bring down the next term, plus 16x. All right, so I go through the same process, focusing just on this first part right here. What times 1 gives me negative 7? Negative 7. X to the first, what's going to give me x squared? Another x. So negative 7x times x gives me negative 7x squared. Negative 7x times negative 2 is going to give me positive 14x. Okay, if I subtract, I have to change all my signs. That becomes positive. This one is now negative. This goes to 0. 16x minus 14x is 2x. Bring down the 4, minus 4, and then I work through the same thing again. X times what is going to give me 2x, a plus 2, positive 2. So now I distribute that 2. So I get 2x minus 2 times 2 is 4. Change my signs because I'm subtracting. That is 0. This is 0. And then this is my answer. Notice it's a quadratic. It's another polynomial. That's okay. That's what it will look like today. Next example, okay? Here's what goes on the inside, here's what goes on the outside. The divisor, the dividend, the divisor. All right, so this one has 3 terms. Okay, notice the power of x's. It goes 2, 1, and then no x. 4, 3, 2, 1, no x. That will be important. You just always want to double check that before you start a problem. So I start focusing on this term right here, x squared. What can I do to make x squared look like 2x to the 4th? I need to multiply by a 2 and another x squared. So 2x squared times x squared is going to give me 2x to the 4th. Distribute this 2x squared across every term here. 2x squared times 2x gives me 4x cubed. 2x squared times negative 3 gives me negative 6x squared. Okay, next step is to subtract. So that's going to change all my signage to the opposite of what it was. So 2x to the 4th minus 2x to the 4th, that's 0. 4x cubed minus 4x cubed, that's 0. That's handy. Negative 5x squared plus 6x squared. That leaves me with a 1x squared. Bring down the next term, plus 3x. All right, so I need to get 1x squared. That's what I have here. So I'm just going to say plus 1, multiply it, distribute it, x squared plus 2x minus 3. So I have a third term over here. That means I need to bring down this third term. Now I'm subtracting, so I'm going to subtract, change all my signs. And let's see what happens. This is 1 minus 1 is a 0. 3x minus 2x is a 1x squared. Negative 2 plus 3 is a 1. All right, so now there's nothing I can multiply x squared by to give me just to an x. So this is what I call my remainder. All right, so what do you do if you end up with a remainder? Well, just like before in grade school, you're going to have to say remainder something. And it looks like this. Since that 1x is a positive, it's going to be a plus. And it's a fraction. It's going to be 1x, or you can just say x, plus 1 over, and then whatever your divisor was. X squared plus 2x minus 3. So this is your answer, all of that. Okay, you can't leave off the remainder. It's going to be a fraction if it's a remainder. Don't let that mess you up. Last example here. All right, so here's what's being divided, and here's your divisor. So notice something here. This goes x to the third. There is no x squared, and it jumps to x to the first. So I have to put in a placeholder for x squared, and so I put in a 0x squared when I build my division problem. You have to have every power of x represented. You have to have the placeholders, otherwise it will not work. Once you get the placeholders in place, it can happen out here in the divisor, or it can happen underneath the division bar. Either place, you have to have placeholders for every power of x. So x times what is going to give me negative x cubed? That'd be negative 1x squared. Distribute that. So negative x cubed minus 10x squared. Subtract it, so I change all my signs. That goes to 0. 0x squared plus 10x squared is 10x squared. Bring down the next term. Now, what times x is going to give me 10x squared? Well, I'm going to multiply by 10 and another x. Distribute the 10x. 10x times x is 10x squared. 10x times 10 is going to give me a 100x. Subtract, so change all my signage. That goes to a subtraction. 10 minus 10 is 0. 75x minus 100x is negative 25x minus 250. All right, so what times x gives me negative 25x? A negative 25. Distribute that. Negative 25x minus 250. 25 times 10 is 250. Subtract, so I change all my signs. That's 0, and this is 0, so it divides perfectly. There's my solution. Right? All right, for the whisk, I want you to work this one out. You're going to divide it, make sure you have all the placeholders. It should have a remainder. Okay, it should have a remainder. And your answer on the whisk is going to be, what's the numerator of the remainder? Okay, numerator, remember, is the top of the fraction. So if I, like in the other example we did, we had x squared plus 2x minus 3. All right, and it was x plus 1. That was our solution on the other example. So my numerator would be x plus 1. That's what I would want in the whisk. All right, but that's not the answer to this one. You need to divide it out and tell me, what did you get for your numerator in your solution? All right, come with questions to class if you're feeling still confused.